Alright, in this video we're going to go over the steps I use to refinish aluminum intake manifolds, you know, that you typically find on a older carbureted motor, V8s, V6s. I think the same techniques would apply to side mount intakes, but this is, I don't have any experience with them, so this is just what I've done on the V-style engines. First, let's go over some of the tools that I use you might need if you're going to do it this way. Okay, first thing you're going to need is some type of cleaning solution. Purple Power works really good. Some kind of degreaser, Purple Power, Simple Green, any of those kind of cleaners. Also, I found Scotch-Brite pads work really well for getting all that built up, caked on oil and other grime off of the intake. So what you want to do is you want to soak it in the solution and kind of break it loose. You can use a pressure washer if you have one, which works fairly well, but I found hot water and a lot of scrubbing is usually the best technique. You want to clean it as best you can, get as much of the grease and grime off of it as possible, so you're starting with a clean slate. Also, when you're cleaning it, it's a good time to try to clean up the mating surfaces of old gasket residue and RTV. Another tool you're going to want to have handy once you get the flanges and everything clean is a straight edge. You want to check the intake for trueness and flatness. You want to make sure it's not warped. So before you get too far involved in the project, you want to make sure that you have a good intake to begin with. Razor blade, again, to clean the mating surfaces, very handy. Painter's tape. I use this blue tape. You could use Scotch tape, but I found this stuff's pretty good because it doesn't leave any residue when you peel it off. So it's really forgiving. It works great. You can stick it to those flanges that you just cleaned, and it keeps them nice when you're painting or however else you choose to refinish your intake. You're also going to need some type of etching acid. I prefer the metal ready because it's what is recommended by POR. Here's the refinishing paint I like to use. POR 15. There's silver. This isn't pigmented with aluminum, so it fills divots and pits really well. This certain one that I use. You can usually find this if you look in their selection. It's rated. I think the heat range on this, on regular POR 15, is rated up to, what is it? 500 degrees, I think. The only thing is that POR 15 is not UV resistant. So if you're running like a hoodless vehicle or maybe like an old tea bucket or something, I wouldn't really suggest this stuff because it will fade. But on any other kind of car, I think it'll work pretty good. So those are pretty much the supplies I use. I'll get into more specifics of how I use them and the process as we go along. This is going to be about a 3-part video. So okay, here's the intake. It's upside down right now because on all Edelbrock intakes they stamp the date code on the bottom. You can see this one was built in March of 1993. This is a Performer. It's your basic 2101. Pretty much the standard. You'll find these on all small block Chevys. These are basically the first step intake if you're looking to just get into it. It's a dual plane low rise intake manifold. So as you can see, my mating surfaces have been cleaned up. I've washed and scrubbed and degreased and scraped this thing for a good amount of time. The more prep you do, the better your paint job's going to come out. So I took a lot of time and did that. And as you can see, it still looks dirty and nasty. Obviously this is the bottom side, so let's flip her over. And this is pretty much what you're going to find on the used market. These intakes being aluminum and being a rough finish, not polished or anything like that, they stain really easily. So yeah, they look nice right out of the box, and they'll stay nice for a while, but as soon as you spill any oil on them or a little antifreeze leaks on them, if you don't clean it up right away, it'll stain your intake, and then they just start looking bad. I'm just really not impressed with them, on most situations. I'd prefer to have some kind of finished intake just because it won't absorb stains and it'll look better longer. But like I said, this is typical of what you find on the used market. Old, dirty, stained, especially if this is going to be going on my truck, which I do a lot of four-wheeling with, and with mud and stuff that's going to get in the engine compartment, if I say had this intake blasted, which is what most people do, they send it out and get it media blasted, glass blasted, soda blasted, some kind of blasted to clean it off. It'll look new again, but with the mud and other things that are going to be flying at it when it's hot, off-road, it's just going to get all stained up again, and it'll probably look bad in 6 months. So I'm not going to pay to have it done that way. I'd rather coat it with this POR 15 paint, and then it'll be a slippery surface, and then anytime it gets dirty, it should be easily hosed or washed off. Also, if I ever scratch it when I'm working on something, like working on the carburetor, if I set tools on here and scratch it up or whatnot, it's very easy to touch it back up again. So I pressure washed this intake when I first got it. Then I scrubbed it in a soapy hot mixture water and a couple different things. I used first I used wheel cleaner, aluminum wheel cleaner. Then I used dish soap, and I used this pad right here, which is a Scotch-Brite. I would suggest the red because it's more rough, but all I had was the green, so I used the green pad. And I just scrubbed and scrubbed and scrubbed until I got most of the dirt out. As you can see, it's still dirty, it's stained. It's not perfect by any means. So that's pretty much the first step in the process. Now what I'll do is I will use the blue painter's tape. I'm going to tape up all my surfaces and get ready to etch it with the acid etch. So that'll be in part 2.